The acceptance letter felt like a golden ticket, heavy with promise. Full ride, engineering, my dream university. I was practically vibrating when I showed it to them, my smile so wide it ached. My name is Lillian, by the way. And that letter? It became the first casualty in a war I didn't even know I was supposed to fight. I remember standing in the living room, the floral wallpaper suddenly oppressive. Dustin, my father, cleared his throat, his eyes avoiding mine. Lillian? About this scholarship. Melina, my mother, chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. It's wonderful, dear, truly. A real achievement. But Royce, he needs a good start, you know. He's got that business idea. I frowned. What does Royce have to do with my scholarship? This is for engineering. Dustin finally looked at me, his expression firm, unyielding. A man needs a solid career, Lillian. To provide. Your brother has so much potential, and a little extra financial help will see him on his way. And a woman's place, dear, Melina added, patting my arm as if I were a child throwing a tantrum, is supporting her family, finding a good husband. This engineering, it's not really for you, is it? All those numbers and, well, men. My jaw tightened. Not for me? I earned it. My grades, my essays. We've decided, Dustin cut in, his tone final. The money we would have saved on your education, with you living at home, of course, can be better utilized helping Royce get established. But I wouldn't be living at home, I argued, my voice rising despite myself. It's a full scholarship, room and board included, Melina sighed, a delicate put-upon sound. Lillian, don't be difficult. We won't be able to support you if you insist on this foolishness. Not a penny for tuition, or living expenses, or anything else. You'll be on your own. Is that what you want? On my own. The words hung in the air, a threat and a dismissal. Royce. My brother. The golden child. It had always been this way. When he wanted the latest gaming console, it appeared. When I asked for advanced math textbooks, I was told to focus on more ladylike pursuits. His scraped knee was a family crisis treated with hushed tones and ice cream. My academic awards were met with a polite, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably turned back to Royce's latest football game or his grand pronouncements about his future. He was the sun, and I was a distant, unacknowledged planet. Their words were meant to break me, to fold me neatly into the little box they'd designed for daughter. A future wife, a future mother, a quiet support system for the men in her life. But as I stood there, the shattered pieces of my dream at my feet, something else happened. A cold, hard fury settled in my gut. It wasn't a loud, explosive anger, but a chilling, resolute fire. If they wouldn't support me, I'd support myself. If they wouldn't see my worth, I'd make it impossible to ignore. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I understand. I didn't. Not really. I didn't understand how they could look at their daughter and see only a placeholder. But I understood their terms. So began the shadow years. I packed a single suitcase, took the meager savings I'd squirreled away from babysitting, and left. 2, sometimes 3, soul-crushing jobs became my reality. I served lukewarm coffee and greasy spoons at dawn, smelling of stale bacon. I restocked shelves in cavernous supermarkets late at night, the fluorescent lights humming a lonely tune. I cleaned offices after everyone else had gone home, the silence broken only by the swish of my mop. My apartment was a tiny damp room with a mattress on the floor and a hot plate that only worked intermittently. Instant noodles and day-old bread were staples. I enrolled in a demanding engineering program at an out-of-state university, far from anyone who knew me or my family. I was a ghost in the system, terrified someone would find out, that somehow they could still stop me. The loneliness was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore through endless study sessions in the library, often sleeping there because it was warmer than my room. There were no parties, no dates, no careless youthful exuberance, just the relentless grind, the gnawing fear of failure, and the ever-present burn of cheap coffee. Every textbook I bought with aching hands, every exam I aced through sheer exhaustion, was a tiny, silent act of defiance. The thought of their smug, pitying faces if I failed, that's what fueled me. I would not give them the satisfaction. Fast forward a decade. They probably imagine I'm exactly what they predicted. A bitter, unmarried woman, working some unfulfilling, low-paid job, regretting my foolishness. Maybe they even feel a little sorry for me, in their own self-satisfied way. The truth? You're reading the words of LW Consulting. That's me. Anonymous, yes. But the LW they whisper about in certain very high-stakes engineering circles. The one who fixes the unfixable, the specialist they call when critical infrastructure projects, bridges, tunnels, power grids, are about to go spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. My solutions are complex, my designs are groundbreaking, and my fees are, shall we say, commensurate with the level of desperation I usually encounter. My clients don't know my face, my gender, or my past. They just know LW delivers results when no one else can. I was in my actual office, a sleek, minimalist space they'd never imagined for me, reviewing the preliminary schematics for a new type of tidal generator array, the kind of intricate puzzle that made my brain sing when my personal phone buzzed, an unknown number. Usually, I'd let it go to voicemail. Business calls came through a separate, heavily filtered line. But some prickle of intuition, made me answer, a hesitant, reedy voice I hadn't heard in nearly 10 years, a voice that had once dictated the terms of my life. Lillian? My breath hitched. My hand tightened on the sleek, cool surface of my desk. Melina. Lillian? Oh, thank God. Her voice cracked, laced with a raw panic I'd never heard from her before. Not even when Royce broke his arm falling out of a tree. We need Royce. Royce is in terrible trouble. I leaned back in my chair, the schematics forgotten. Mother, I said, my voice carefully neutral, a calm I didn't entirely feel. What kind of trouble? Oh, Lillian, it's awful, she wailed, the panic escalating. His job, his whole career. He's leading this huge project, something very important, and it's all going wrong. Terribly wrong. They're talking about, well, I don't understand the half of it, but it's bad. Very bad. What project is it? I asked, keeping my tone even. I don't know the name, dear. Something with structures and computers. Dustin is beside himself. Royce, he's barely sleeping. He could lose everything. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. They're trying to find some specialist, some kind of expert. Apparently there aren't many who can handle this sort of thing. It's very niche. A muscle twitched in my jaw. An expert, you say? Yes, someone who can fix it. They're looking everywhere. Dustin even said they might have to pay a fortune, but what choice do they have? Royce's reputation is on the line. She sniffled. It's just so unfair. He works so hard. I almost choked. Royce working hard? His version of hard work usually involved delegating and taking credit. I see, I said. Well, I hope they find someone for him. The lie tasted like ash, but also, strangely, like a fine wine. We were hoping... Well, you were always so clever with your books, Lillian, she ventured, a wheedling tone creeping in. Maybe you've heard of someone? In your... whatever it is you do now. Any contacts? My field is quite different, Mother, I replied. The understatement of the century. I doubt I'd know anyone suitable. Oh. The disappointment in her voice was palpable. Well, if you think of anything at all, I'll let you know, I said, ending the call before she could launch into another round of lamentations for her precious boy. I stared at my phone for a long moment, a strange buzzing in my ears. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Later that afternoon, an email pinged in my personal inbox. It was from Melina. The subject line simply read, FWD, Expert Profile. Advice? My cursor hovered over it. With a deep breath, I clicked. Her brief message was typed above the forwarded content. Lillian, dear, Royce's company found this person. They say she's the only one who can possibly help, but her company charges an absolute fortune, and she sounds very difficult. What do you think? Any advice on how Royce should handle this? Maybe you could look at her profile, see if she seems legitimate. We're just so worried he'll be taken advantage of. Love, Mom. Taken advantage of. The irony was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I scrolled down to the forwarded attachment. It was a PDF. LW Consulting, Specialized Engineering Solutions for Critical Infrastructure Failure. My own logo, a stylized bridge arching over a complex circuit pattern, stared back at me. Below it, the carefully crafted, deliberately anonymous professional profile I'd spent years perfecting. It listed key areas of expertise, highlighted a few, heavily redacted for confidentiality, past successes, and outlined the general philosophy of LW Consulting: discretion, unparalleled expertise, and results-driven solutions for problems others deemed impossible. There was no photo, no personal details, just the cold, hard facts of LW's capabilities. My capabilities. I leaned back, a slow, disbelieving laugh bubbling up from my chest. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a full-throated laugh that echoed in my silent office. They had searched the ends of the earth for the one person who could save Royce, and they had found me. The daughter they'd dismissed, the woman whose ambitions they'd tried to crush, was now the anonymous, difficult expert holding their golden boy's future in her hands. The sheer, exquisite poetry of it was almost too much to bear. All those years of struggle, of scrimping and saving, of burning the midnight oil, while they probably never gave me a second thought beyond a vague pity. All of it had led to this moment. They needed me. Not Lillian, the disappointing daughter. They needed LW Consulting, the formidable, expensive expert. My laughter subsided, replaced by a chilling calm. The fire that had ignited in their living room all those years ago, the one I'd banked and tended in secret, now blazed. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a gift. A beautifully wrapped package of karmic retribution. A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. I looked at the email from Melina, at her innocent, desperate plea for advice. Oh, I have more than advice, Mother, I whispered to the empty room, the words tasting like victory. I have a reckoning. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not to reply to Melina, but to my business email. A new inquiry had indeed arrived earlier from Royce's company, a formal request for consultation from LW Consulting, outlining the dire situation with their project. It had been sitting in my priority inbox, waiting for my consideration. Consideration complete. I would take the case, and they would pay, in more ways than one. My reply to Royce's company, under the banner of LW Consulting, was swift and unambiguous. I outlined my standard fee structure, a figure that I knew would make their eyes water. I detailed the non-negotiable terms: complete, unfettered autonomy in my assessment and proposed solution, direct, unmediated access to all project data, personnel, and relevant sites, and a hefty upfront retainer, payable immediately, before any substantive work would begin. I also, with a certain grim satisfaction, included a clause for a complexity surcharge, citing the preliminary information they'd provided, which indicated a problem of significant and unusual entanglement. That was my little inside joke. The email was a masterpiece of detached professionalism, polite yet utterly inflexible. LW Consulting did not negotiate on its value or its methods. Take it or leave it. It didn't take long for the fallout. My personal phone rang again a few hours later. Melina. Lillian! This consultant! This LW person! Her voice was shrill. They sent Royce's company the terms. It's outrageous. The money they're asking for. It's astronomical. And the demands. They want to control everything. I made a sympathetic noise. Oh dear, that does sound assertive. Assertive? It's highway robbery, she sputtered. Dustin is furious. He says Royce should tell them to get lost. But they also said this LW is the only one who can do it. They're in such a bind. Well, Mother, I said, swirling the tea in my mug. Experts in highly specialized fields often command high prices. Supply and demand, you know. But this is beyond, she insisted. Can't Royce negotiate? Reason with her? Maybe if he explains the situation, appeals to her better nature? I nearly laughed. LW Consulting didn't have a better nature. LW Consulting had contracts and deliverables. Perhaps, I offered vaguely. But these types of consultants are often very firm. They know their worth. Worth, she scoffed. It's just so much stress. Poor Royce. Poor Royce. The refrain of my childhood. I ended the call with more empty platitudes, a delicious, dark amusement bubbling just beneath the surface. The panic was escalating nicely. Later that evening, I called Yolanda. We'd met during those grueling university years, two scholarship kids fighting for our futures, sharing stale donuts and whispered dreams in the library stacks. She knew everything, every bitter detail of my family's betrayal. You will not believe what just landed in my lap, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I laid it all out. The call from Melina, the forwarded email, the identity of LW Consulting. Yolanda was silent for a moment, then let out a low whistle. No, freaking way, she breathed. Lillian, that is karmic gold. Pure, unadulterated karmic gold. Tell me about it, I said, a grin spreading across my face. So what are you going to do? She asked, a thrill in her voice. Are you going to take them to the cleaners? The cleaners, the dry cleaners, the whole damn laundromat, I confirmed. But professionally, of course. Of course, she echoed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Oh, this is rich. They deserve every single bit of this, Lily. After what they put you through. Her voice hardened. Make them sweat. That's the plan. The flashbacks hit me then, unbidden, as they often did when I thought of those years. Skipping dinner for 3 days straight to afford a crucial textbook, the gnawing ache in my stomach during a final exam, making it hard to concentrate, huddling in my threadbare coat in the unheated library annex, fingers numb, trying to decipher complex equations while my classmates were out at parties. The shame of my worn-out shoes, the constant fear of being discovered as a fraud, someone who didn't belong. The crushing loneliness of having no one to share the small victories with, no one to lean on when the weight felt unbearable. These memories weren't just ghosts, they were fuel. The next day, an email landed in the LW Consulting inbox. It was from Royce, not his company's generic address, but his personal work email. The subject line, query regarding LW Consulting fee structure. His tone was curt, bordering on arrogant, even in text. He questioned the exorbitant fees, demanded a more detailed justification for the retainer, and hinted that he was exploring alternative, more cost-effective solutions. He clearly thought he could bully or intimidate LW Consulting into lowering its price. The same Royce who probably still thought a woman's place was to fetch him a beer. A cold smile touched my lips. Oh, this was going to be even more satisfying than I thought. He had no idea who he was dealing with, on any level. Let him explore. Let him scramble. The trap was set, and he was walking right into it, one entitled Dismissive Email at a time. Royce's exploration of alternative, more cost-effective solutions went about as well as I expected. Which is to say, It crashed and burned spectacularly. My specialization wasn't just niche, it was practically a one-woman show. The specific combination of advanced structural engineering, predictive algorithmic analysis, and a deep understanding of catastrophic failure points in legacy systems that his project required, that was my playground, and mine alone. The frantic energy coming through my parents' increasingly frequent calls told the story. "He's spoken to a dozen firms, Lillian," Dustin grumbled one evening, his voice tight with frustration. "Nobody can give him a straight answer. They all say it's too complex or they don't have the right people. This LW character, they might be arrogant, but it seems they're the only game in town." "What a predicament," I murmured, sketching a particularly elegant solution to a hypothetical stress fracture on a notepad. "Predicament? It's a disaster," Melina cut in, snatching the phone, I imagined. "Lucian, Royce's boss, is practically living in Royce's office. He's threatening all sorts of things. And there are whispers, Lillian. The media. They're starting to ask questions about delays on the project. If this gets out, that would be unfortunate," I agreed, keeping my voice placid. Inside, a small dark part of me was doing a victory lap. The pressure cooker was heating up nicely. As LW Consulting, I maintained a professional, almost glacial calm. Royce's increasingly desperate emails, which shifted from demanding to almost pleading, were met with polite, concise reiterations of my terms. I'd provide just enough technical jargon in my responses to demonstrate that LW understood the problem intimately, perhaps even better than his own team did, but never enough for them to reverse engineer a solution. Each email was a carefully calibrated dose of hope and frustration for them. "Mother, father," I'd say during their calls, affecting a tone of concerned helplessness. "Perhaps Royce could try to build a rapport with this consultant? Sometimes a personal touch can make a difference." I knew, of course, that LW Consulting was immune to personal touches, especially from a Walton. "He's tried," Melina exclaimed. "He said she's like talking to a brick wall. A very expensive, very condescending brick wall." I had to bite back a smile at that. Condescending. Rich. Coming from them. The calls became a strange ritual. They'd vent about the impossible expert, complain about the mounting pressure on poor Royce, and occasionally, pathetically, ask if I, the daughter they'd written off, had any brilliant ideas or knew any important people who could magically fix this. The irony was so thick, I could have bottled it and sold it as a luxury perfume. Eau de Comopence, perhaps. One afternoon, an email from Royce to LW Consulting arrived that was particularly Royce. He was clearly at the end of his tether. After a long, rambling paragraph detailing his latest failed attempt to find an alternative and the immense pressure he was under, he tacked on a final, frustrated jab. "Frankly," he wrote, his digital voice dripping with disdain, "your firm's attitude is appalling. Some people get a fancy degree and think they're God's gift to engineering, clearly lacking any real-world humility or understanding of collaborative business practice. Perhaps if LW spent less time polishing their ego and more time being reasonable, we could find a sensible path forward." I stared at the words. Some people get a fancy degree and think they're God's gift. He was talking about me, LW Consulting. But he was also, unknowingly, echoing the very sentiments they'd used to dismiss my ambitions all those years ago. The hypocrisy was a fresh slap in the face, igniting a renewed surge of cold fury. Oh, he thought LW lacked humility? He hadn't seen anything yet. My resolve, already diamond hard, solidified further. This wasn't just about getting paid anymore. This was about dismantling his arrogance, brick by brick. This was about forcing him and them to confront the reality of who they'd discarded. I took a deep breath and composed LW Consulting's reply. It was brief, professional, and utterly unmoved. LW Consulting appreciates your candid feedback. Our terms remain as previously stated. Should you wish to proceed, The initial retainer is due by close of business tomorrow. Otherwise, we will assume you have secured alternative counsel and will close this inquiry." The ball was back in his court, and the court, I knew, was shrinking rapidly around him. He was squirming, the golden boy, finally facing a problem his privilege and parental coddling couldn't solve. And I, the ghost of his sister, was pulling the strings. Royce's company, or rather, Royce himself, capitulated. The retainer, all 7 figures of it, appeared in LW Consulting's account by midday the next day. No further commentary, just the silent scream of a wire transfer. Victory. Phase 1. As LW, I agreed to an initial video consultation. Audio only for LW Consulting. My assistant, a very real, very efficient remote worker named Sarah who knew me only as LW, informed them. Standard protocol for preliminary assessments to maintain focus on technical data. More like standard protocol to keep my face off their screen until the perfect moment. I used a voice modulator, of course. Nothing too outlandish. Just enough to deepen my pitch slightly and add a crisp, almost metallic edge to my words. The LW persona was all about cool, detached, slightly intimidating competence. The video call flickered to life. Royce's face appeared, looking haggard. Bags under his eyes, his usually perfect hair slightly askew. Good. Beside him sat Lucian, his boss, a man whose expression could curdle milk. A few other anxious-looking engineers, Royce's team, filled the other squares on the screen. "Mr. Royce," I began, my modulated voice filling the virtual room. "Mr. Lucian, gentlemen, let us begin. Please walk LW Consulting through the primary failure points as you currently understand them." Royce launched into a shaky, jargon-filled explanation. I listened, interjecting only with extremely pointed technical questions. Questions that dug deeper than he was prepared for. Questions that hinted at a knowledge of the project's underlying architecture that an outside consultant at this early stage simply shouldn't possess. "And the resonate frequency dampeners on the primary support struts, Mr. Royce," I cut in at one point. "Were the original material specifications adhered to, or was there a substitution made post-tender to, shall we say, optimize budgetary allocations?" Royce visibly paled. He stammered something about checking the logs. Lucian shot him a look that could strip paint. I could almost hear the gears grinding in Royce's head. "How does she know that?" I let the silence stretch, then continued. "It is LW Consulting's experience that seemingly minor deviations in foundational components can have cascading consequences. Later, as they described their frantic, failed attempts to patch the system, I dropped another carefully aimed barb. A robust educational foundation is, of course, paramount in averting such complexities, even in fields some might deem unconventional for certain people. Or perhaps, especially in those fields." Royce flinched. I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. My little nod to their past pronouncements about a woman's place. The call continued in this vein for an hour. Me, the disembodied, all-knowing voice, systematically dissecting their failures, Royce growing increasingly flustered, Lucian's expression growing increasingly thunderous. That evening, Melina called, her voice a tight knot of anxiety. "Lillian, Royce had a call with that woman today. He said it was brutal. She knows things, Lillian. Things she shouldn't know. It's like she can see right through the whole project." "She sounds very thorough," I commented, examining my fingernails. "Thorough? She's terrifying." Melina paused. "His wife, Blair, she's a wreck. She's so worried about their mortgage, their future. If Royce loses this job, they'll be ruined. She was saying, maybe you could talk to the expert, Lillian?" I choked on my water. "Me? Why on earth would I talk to her?" "Well," Melina said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone again, "you're a woman. She's a woman. Maybe you could, appeal to her on a personal level, woman to woman, soften her up a bit." Explain how much this means to Royce, to our family? The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it stole my breath. After everything, after they told me my ambitions were unsuitable for a woman, now they wanted me to use my gender to appeal to the very expert they'd driven me to become. It was almost too perfect. "Mother," I said, my voice dangerously soft, "I highly doubt this LW person is susceptible to that kind of appeal. From what you've told me, she sounds strictly professional." "But you could try," she pleaded. "For Royce." I ended the call, my mind reeling. This was better than I could have ever scripted. The next morning, as LW Consulting, I sent my follow-up email. To proceed with a definitive diagnostic and solution proposal, I wrote, a face-to-face meeting is required. This meeting will take place at a location of LW Consulting's choosing. Mr. Royce, your core project team, and any primary stakeholders whose commitment is integral to project success will need to be present. I let the term primary stakeholders hang there, ambiguous enough for them to interpret. Full transparency is required from your end, I continued, and LW needs to see the whites of the eyes of who LW is saving. A few hours later, Royce's terse reply, "Agreed. Send the details." He was cornered, and he knew it. The web was tightening. The location I chose for LW Consulting's grand reveal wasn't my actual office. Too personal. Too much of my real life embedded in its walls. Instead, I booked a sleek, impersonal boardroom in a high-end corporate rental space downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a city I'd conquered on my own terms. It was neutral territory, but it exuded power and success. My success. Sarah, my invaluable remote assistant, handled the logistics with Royce's increasingly frantic PA. Date, time, a list of attendees required from their end. Royce, Lucian, and 2 of his lead engineers were confirmed. Then came the inevitable call from Melina. "Lillian, dear," she began, her voice hushed and conspiratorial. "This LW woman, she's insisted on an in-person meeting. Royce is going, of course, and his boss. But Dustin and I, we were thinking, perhaps we should go too?" I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. "You? Why would you go, Mother?" "Well," she said, a hint of self-importance creeping in, "we are Royce's parents. We're stakeholders in his success, aren't we? We thought, if we're there, we can appeal to her better nature, show her what a good family he comes from, ensure Royce isn't taken advantage of by this sharp woman. Taken advantage of." There was that phrase again. The irony was a constant, bitter companion. "We want to show a united front," Dustin added, his gruff voice audible in the background. "Let her see we stand by our son." My son, not our children. Never our children. A laugh, cold and sharp, threatened to escape me. I swallowed it down, replacing it with a carefully crafted tone of thoughtful consideration. An appeal to her better nature? A united front? I paused, as if weighing the wisdom of their plan. "Yes, Mother, Father. I think that's an excellent idea. Absolutely. You should definitely go. Show her exactly who you are." "Oh, good. I'm so glad you agree, dear," Melina chirped, relieved. "We were a bit unsure, but if you think it's wise," "Completely wise," I assured them. Let them walk straight into it. Let them dress in their Sunday best to plead for the son they adored, to the daughter they'd discarded. The night before the meeting, I stood before my full-length mirror. I didn't own many power suits, my usual work attire being comfortable and practical for long hours at my desk. But for this occasion, I'd invested. A perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white silk blouse, understated, elegant, and radiating an aura of absolute, unshakable competence. The kind of outfit that cost more than Royce probably thought I'd earn in a year. I looked at my reflection. The girl who'd cried herself to sleep in a cold library, who'd eaten stale bread to save money for textbooks, was gone. In her place stood a woman. A woman who had built an empire from the ashes of their dismissal. A woman who was about to dictate terms to the very people who had once dictated hers. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Nerves, yes, a tremor of apprehension at the emotional storm I was about to unleash. But beneath it, a fierce, exhilarating anticipation. Years, years of suppressed anger, of quiet determination, of relentless, grinding work had all funneled towards this single point in time. Tomorrow they would see me, not the shadow they'd cast aside, but the architect of their reckoning. Sleep was elusive. I replayed their words from that day, the day they'd shattered my scholarship dreams. A woman's place is at home. Royce needs a good start. The casual cruelty, the dismissive sexism, it still stung, even after all this time. But now the sting was mingled with the icy thrill of impending justice. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I arrived at the rented boardroom an hour early. I checked the tech, the seating arrangement, the carafe of water and glasses on the polished mahogany table. Everything was perfect, impersonal, intimidating. I stood by the expansive window, looking out at the sprawling city below. My city. I heard the click of the thermostat, the distant hum of traffic, the frantic thumping of my own pulse. Then, voices in the corridor. Melina's anxious, high-pitched tones, fluttering like a trapped moth. Dustin's gruff, attempting to be reassuring mumbles. And Royce. Royce's voice, tight with stress, muttering something about last-minute data points. My back was to the door. I heard it click open. Footsteps. The scent of Melina's familiar, slightly cloying perfume. I took one last, deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I heard them enter, the soft shuffle of feet on the plush carpet. Royce cleared his throat. Ms. L.W. Consulting? We're here. Lucian and my team are just parking. I remained facing the window for a beat longer, letting the silence stretch, letting their anticipation build. Then slowly, deliberately, I turned. Time didn't just stop. It shattered. Melina gasped, a strangled, horrified sound. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening to saucers. The carefully arranged expression of maternal concern on her face dissolved into raw, naked shock. Dustin froze mid-stride, his jaw going slack. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a pasty, bewildered gray. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. And Royce. Oh, Royce. He just stared. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish gasping for air. Disbelief warred with a dawning, sickening horror that crawled across his features. His meticulously prepared notes fluttered from his nerveless fingers, scattering across the floor. Lillian, he choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. The name sounded alien on his lips, dragged from a forgotten past. I offered them a small, cool smile. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Hello, Royce, I said, my voice calm, steady, devoid of the tremor that had plagued me the night before. Mother. Father. I paused, letting the titles hang in the air, heavy with unspoken history. Or should I say, clients? The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, chaos erupted. Lillian, what is this? A joke? Melina finally found her voice, shrill and accusing. How could you? Dustin, recovering slightly, scowled. You tricked us. This is deception. Royce simply gaped, his face a mask of stunned betrayal. You're L.W. Consulting? But how? How? I repeated, my voice taking on an edge of steel. I'll tell you how. While you, Royce, were getting your good start, funded by the scholarship I earned, I was working 3 jobs. While you were networking at university clubs, I was sleeping in the library because it was warmer than my rented room. While you were being handed opportunities, I was fighting for every scrap, every credit, every ounce of knowledge. I walked slowly towards the head of the table, my heels clicking decisively on the polished floor. I gestured to the empty chairs. Please sit. We have much to discuss. They remained standing, rooted to the spot, staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. Lucian and Royce's two engineers chose that moment to walk in, their expressions initially professional, then quickly morphing into confusion as they took in the tableau of the stunned Walton family and me, standing calmly at the head of the table. "Ah, Mr. Lucian, gentlemen," I said, my voice returning to the crisp, professional tone of LW Consulting. "Please, join us. We were just getting to the personal introductions." Royce looked like he was about to vomit. Melina started to weep, quiet, hiccuping sobs. Dustin's face was a thundercloud. I let them stew in their shock for a moment longer. Then I began. I laid out my history, their history with me. I recounted their words, verbatim, from that day in the living room. A woman's place is at home. Your brother needs this more. I detailed the years of struggle, the sacrifices they'd forced upon me, the casual cruelty of their dismissal. All while Royce, their golden boy, had glided through life on a path they'd paved with my stolen opportunities. I had prepared for this. From my briefcase, I pulled out a slim folder. My original scholarship letter. My university transcripts, glowing with honors. A summary of LW Consulting's most notable, anonymized achievements. Undeniable proof. You needed an expert, I said, my gaze sweeping over their shattered faces. The best. And you found her. You just didn't realize you'd already met her. You didn't realize you'd thrown her away. Lucian, to his credit, looked utterly bewildered, but also intrigued, his sharp eyes flicking between me and Royce. "So," I said, my voice dropping, all business now. "Let's talk terms. LW Consulting will save Royce's project, and his career. But it will cost you." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. My terms. 1. Full payment of LW Consulting's standard fee, as previously quoted. Plus, I added, looking directly at Melina and Dustin, a 25% family tax for emotional damages and lost opportunities. Melina gasped again. Dustin's face turned a darker shade of red. 2. A formal written apology from each of you, Melina, Dustin, and Royce, acknowledging your sexism, your dismissal of my ambitions, the deliberate withholding of support, and the profound pain and hardship you caused. These apologies will be read aloud. To me, in this room. Royce flinched as if struck. 3. Royce, you will publicly credit LW Consulting for saving this project. No vague mentions. Full, unequivocal credit. And 4, I continued, my voice unwavering, you will establish an educational fund in my name, the Lillian Walton STEM Advancement Fund for Young Women, at my old high school. The initial endowment will be equivalent to the full amount you invested in Royce's Good Start, adjusted for inflation. Royce looked like he was going to faint. Melina was openly sobbing now. Dustin stared at the paper, then at me, his expression a mixture of fury and dawning, horrified comprehension. The price of their prejudice was being laid bare. "These are my terms," I stated, my gaze locking with Royce's. He looked utterly broken, the arrogance stripped away, leaving behind a hollow shell. Non-negotiable. Your career, Royce, your reputation, your future. It all hangs in the balance. I leaned forward slightly. What's it going to be? Will you finally acknowledge what a woman's place can truly be? The silence in the boardroom was a living thing, thick with unspoken accusations, and the crushing weight of consequence. Lucian, ever the pragmatist, was the first to break it, his eyes fixed on Royce. "Well, Royce, Your consultant has laid out her terms. The project is sinking. What's your decision? Royce looked from Lucian's stony face to mine, then to his weeping mother and his apoplectic father. The fight had gone out of him. He was a cornered animal, all bluster replaced by a raw, desperate fear. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. We agree, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. We agree to the terms. Melina let out a choked sob. Dustin just stared at the tabletop, his face a mask of grim defeat. The apologies were excruciating. For them. Deeply, profoundly satisfying for me. Royce went first. He stood, trembling slightly, the paper shaking in his hand. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion at first, as he read the words I had essentially dictated he write. I, Royce, acknowledge the profound unfairness of my parents' decision to deny Lillian her scholarship, and to redirect those resources to me. As he continued, detailing the sexism, the dismissal, the years of his unearned advantage, something in his voice began to crack. By the end, as he read the words, I acknowledge the pain and hardship this caused my sister, Lillian, and I am truly sorry. His voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Shame? Regret? Or just the agony of utter humiliation? It didn't matter. He said the words. Melina was next. She could barely get through hers, her voice choked with tears. My traditional views blinded me. I failed you, Lillian, as a mother. It was a torrent of self-recrimination, prompted by the stark reality of her desperation. Dustin's was the hardest. He read his apology in a low, gruff monotone, his eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. My beliefs about a woman's place were wrong. I prioritized my son. I see now. The damage. He didn't look at me once, but the words, forced from him, were enough. The money transfer for the fees and the family tax was initiated right there, Royce tapping numbly on his laptop under Lucien's watchful eye. The initial pledge for the scholarship fund was notarized by a lawyer I'd had on standby. Then, and only then, did I turn to the technical matter at hand. Coldly, efficiently, I laid out the critical flaws in Royce's project and the precise, elegant solution LW Consulting, I, had devised. I didn't simplify. I used the most complex terminology, outlined the intricate recalibrations needed, ensuring Royce understood just how far out of his depth he'd been. I watched the dawning comprehension on his face and on the faces of his engineers as they realized the sheer scope of their impending failure and the brilliance of the rescue. I saved his career, right there in that boardroom. But his image, at least in Lucian's eyes and among his core team, was forever changed. He was no longer the golden boy. He was the man who had to be bailed out by the sister his family had tried to erase. I made sure Lucien understood, in a private aside as they were packing up, that LW Consulting's discretion regarding the full story was contingent on Royce's continued good behavior and public acknowledgement. In the days that followed, the family dynamic shifted seismically. The old order was shattered. They looked at me differently now, with a mixture of fear, deep-seated resentment, and a grudging, horrified respect. Melina tried a few times to call. Lillian, dear, perhaps we could have dinner. Talk? I don't think so, Mother, I'd replied, my voice polite but firm. There's nothing left to say that wasn't said in that boardroom. The chasm was too wide, the damage too profound for a simple dinner to fix. I kept them at arm's length, a cool, distant presence in their lives, a constant reminder of their reckoning. Establishing the Lillian Walton STEM Advancement Fund for Young Women was profound. Meeting the first recipients, bright, ambitious girls with dreams shining in their eyes, girls who wouldn't have to choose between their education and their family's outdated expectations. That was a different kind of victory, a cleaner one. It didn't erase the bitterness of my own lost years, but it repurposed the pain into something powerful, something good. Professionally, LW Consulting soared. The successful, high-profile rescue of Royce's project, with him publicly, and very humbly, crediting my firm, brought in a new wave of even more challenging, more lucrative contracts. The revenge had been undeniably sweet, the justice, absolute. There was a quiet satisfaction in that, a settling of old scores. But it wasn't the cheers of the crowd I craved. It was the quiet hum of my own mind solving the next impossible problem, the knowledge that I had built this, all of it, on my own terms. The price they paid was steep, a toll extracted for years of arrogance and neglect. But the price I had paid for my ambition was steeper still, years of loneliness, struggle, and the constant ache of being undervalued by those who should have cherished me most. Now finally, they understood a fraction of that cost. They understood that my place wasn't at home or in Royce's shadow. My place was wherever I damn well decided it to be. And I was just getting started. The world was finally seeing what Lillian, not just LW, was truly worth.